Hello and welcome. I'm Joel Vanner, and thank you for tuning in to. But for now, Vice President of SJ Luke Ahearn sat down with me earlier to discuss the planning of this afternoon's event. All right. So, yeah, go ahead, count me down. Government Association, Luke Ahearn, thank you so much for joining me, Luke.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Luke, as Vice President, it is in your position to coordinate this event, the State of the QUnion. For those who may not know what State of the QUnion is, can you just give us a brief summary of the event?
So this is something that SJ has been doing for quite a few years now. The Vice President is the host of the event. We invite different university administrators to this event, and we ask them questions that the students are interested in knowing about club sports, about different initiatives that we're working on, the university's budget, anything across the university that students are really interested in. It gives us an opportunity to finally put the administrators out there and hold them accountable to all these different issues that students wanted to have answers to.
So this afternoon there will be 5 panelists of university administrators. How did you select the panelists this year?
This year we wanted to really get a good feeling of everything across the university, and so we decided to select the biggest names possible. So we have Dr. Thompson, we have President Judy Olian, Filardi, Monique, Drucker, Don Sawyer, Annalisa Zinn. So we actually have 6. And so those are people who are in charge of almost every aspect of the university, and so they're giving an opportunity for almost every question to be answered.
And what topics do you think will be discussed? I know you went through kind of what each person's responsibility is, but what do you think the main topics students want to know about?
A lot of students are interested with a lot of the finances of the university. That's something that, considering the expense of the school, that's something that students want to know more about. There's always questions about the student experience from the academic point of view as well as the extracurricular point of view, and so that's something that we're going to be asking about. And then students are also going to have the opportunities to submit questions that we might not have thought about, and so that's something that is also going to be accounted for.
So the State of the QUnion is taking place right downstairs in the piazza, but for those who can't make it to the piazza or those who want to submit questions, how can they submit questions?
So Q30 will obviously be doing this live stream that everybody's watching right now, and right next to the live stream is a link to Slido, which is going to be an online platform where students can submit questions. If they enter the code 1374 on the Slido platform, they'll be able to type in questions that will be submitted. After they're reviewed, they'll go up onto a screen, and students can thumb up the questions that they want to see asked the most, and those are the questions that we're going to get to.
Well, Luke, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon, and looking forward to an informative event.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Some great insight there from Vice President of SJ Luke Ahearn. And now let's introduce the panelists for this afternoon. President Judy Olian is the 9th president of Quinnipiac University. She joined our community on July 1st, 2018 after 12 years as Dean of the Johnny Anderson School of Management at UCLA, and she recently collaborated with faculty, staff, and students to create a strategic plan. Next on the panel, we have Executive Vice President and Provost Mark Thompson, who joined Quinnipiac in 1998 and has served in this position since 2013. He's responsible for internal affairs like academic affairs, athletics, public safety, and information services. Next up, we have Annalisa Zinn, Vice President for Academic Innovation and Effectiveness. Annalisa is responsible for all academic policies and academic support services. She oversees the Registrar, Library, Albert Schweitzer Institute, Veterans Affairs, and the Learning Commons. Next up on the panel, we have Vice President and Dean of Students, Monique Drucker. Monique is responsible for student conduct. She oversees campus life, fraternity and sorority life, community service, the student center and student life, residential life, health, and wellness. Next up on the panel, we have Vice President for Facilities and Capital Planning, Salvatore Filardi. Sal Filardi joined Quinnipiac in 2012, and he is responsible for facilities management, campus planning, and real estate acquisitions. And finally, we have Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and Chief Diversity Officer Don Sawyer. Don oversees international students and study abroad programs. He also advises staff from multicultural identity groups on campus and is responsible for inclusivity initiatives. And like I said, after the State of the Union, be sure to stay tuned in to the live stream, as we'll have a live interview with Monique Drucker and Sal Filardi, as well as a roundtable interview with various members of SGA to discuss the topics that were brought up in this afternoon's event. But for now, we'll toss it down to the piazza where the State of the Union is slated to begin any moment.
set? Good. Students, faculty, and staff, welcome to the 2019 State of the QUnion. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Ryan Hicks, and I serve as the Student Government Association President. The State of the QUnion is an event held every spring semester that creates a town hall-style opportunity for students to interact with those who run our university. Today we have a wonderful panel of many of Quinnipiac's most senior members who will provide significant insight to the current state of our university as well as plans for the future. Before we begin, I am pleased to provide an update on the insight into some of the things your Student Government Association has accomplished and is working on this year. We have consistently worked on your behalf to make changes to our university and enhance your student experience. From an advocacy standpoint, we have completed the implementation of a smoke-free institution in partnership with President Olian, finalized the addition of seasonal lights and decorations that will be placed throughout campus during the wintertime. We've enhanced the shuttle experience, improved facilities with a crosswalk from Pearlroth to the Bobcat Den, added trash barrels to New Village, and countless other initiatives. In addition to our completed initiatives, we continue to advocate for club sports, improving the York Hill student experience, adding a cultural education program for all of our incoming students, increasing sustainability on multiple fronts, growing Bobcat spirit, and countless other initiatives as well. We aim to continue to express your interests and concerns to the faculty, staff, and administration. If there's any feedback from this event or anything else you would like to share with us, please feel free to reach out to a member of SGA today. As always, our email, sga@qu.edu, and our suite is always open for any student to provide feedback, concerns, or initiative ideas. It is now a great honor for me to introduce our panel of guests today, beginning with President Olian, Dr. Don Sawyer, our Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Monique Drucker, our Vice President and Dean of Students, Dr. Annalisa Zinn, our Vice President for Academic Innovation and Effectiveness, Mr. Sal Filardi, our Vice President for Facilities and Capital Planning, and Dr. Mark Thompson, our Executive Vice President and Provost. And now, I would like to invite President Olian to the podium for opening remarks. Thank you, President Olian.
Thank you, Ryan. Hello there. Thank you, Ryan, and hello, everyone. This is my first QUnion, the day after the State of the Union, and I think that we have a lot of very positive things to report here. And I want to thank Ryan and Luke and all of the members of the SGA for organizing this. Is this okay? Okay. It's attacking me, but I think I can handle that. I'd like to start out by talking briefly, very briefly, about our strategic plan, highlighting the four main goals of the plan. And then I'll mention a few newsy items, but really we want to leave as much time as we can for dialogue and for you to ask questions and for us to be as responsive. And of course, I'm here with my very dear colleagues who are just the best leadership team that one could hope for across all universities in the country. So I feel that I'm in great hands, and I think you should feel that you're in great hands too. We had a meeting a couple days ago, actually on Monday, about the strategic plan, and I don't want to repeat ourselves, but I'll just touch on some of the highlights. It was a very extensive process that examined ourselves, our future, what we stand for, the landscape of change in communities, in education, in markets, in technologies. We had students who participated in that process, and I think we're coming up with something that is very inclusive and frankly very exciting about the future of Quinnipiac, which it should be, because Quinnipiac is very exciting. The strategic plan envisions Quinnipiac as the university of the future, with technologies, societies, market structures changing so dramatically in an unprecedented way. The only thing that we can talk of as constant is actually change. And we need to be the institution that's agile enough to not just keep up with the change, but actually lead it so that you are positioned for your world of change of the future. We converged on 4 major priorities or goals for the strategic plan. I'll mention the goals and maybe one example initiative under each. I'm presuming that you're familiar with the plan. We sent out the narrative of the draft, and then we also sent out kind of the Cliff Notes version in the PowerPoint. So I'm not going to repeat the plan. I'll just give you a bit of a taste. The first goal is to build an institutional-wide mindset that prepares graduates as enlightened citizens for careers of the 21st century. And we know, based on the World Economic Forum reports and others, that we're really preparing you for a world that we don't know what it'll be, because something like 65% of the jobs in 2030 don't exist today. 2022, that will be a year in which something like 54% of the individuals who are in job markets will require reskilling and upskilling to just keep up with their jobs. So change is constant, and what we need to know, we don't really know yet. So we're positioning you for jobs that don't even exist today. So our solution is to create a mindset, an openness to change, a capacity for systems thinking, curiosity to learn about things we don't yet know, a bias towards data analytics and data research, and tight connections to employers who are creating the jobs of the future. So we must be preparing you for that world in a community that is diverse, that doesn't look like we look today, that it'll be, in fact, much more diverse, where today minorities are majorities. Now, there are many ways in which we can create that mindset of the 21st century. I will just mention one example out of the plan, and that's QChip, which is the Quinnipiac Center for High Impact Practices. This is a set of learning approaches, some of which exist today, that are embedded in the fabric of what QU is offering and will offer. So it's a place for high intensity, high engagement learning opportunities that run throughout our curriculum. Some examples are health science simulations, legal or entrepreneurial outreach clinics in communities that really expose you to what is, direct engagement with faculty on applied research projects, learning that is centered around society's grand challenges, that you do projects on those, using digital games to simulate real-world phenomena in your classes, hackathons in partnership with companies to develop solutions to significant needs, practicums or co-ops in service organizations, either domestically or globally, in-prison courses that immerse learners in the challenges of the correctional system, and more, lots more. But these are examples of high-intensity learning opportunities that minimize the gap between school to work. In fact, school is work and work is school, because you might be learning in a company, in a service learning organization, or here, but it's very much tied to the here and now of what employers need. Second overarching goal in the plan is to stimulate a learning environment centered on inclusive excellence. And here's an example of how we might do this, and we will do this. We'll develop stronger pipeline programs and attraction points for diverse students to QU. Graduates of the future need to reflect our towns, our cities, our nation, our planet. And I was just in New Haven last week. I mentioned that to some of you who were there on Monday. With kindergartners at the Fairhaven School, there were virtually no students who weren't from ethnic backgrounds other than Caucasian. This was clearly a majority-minority population. And in the community of the future, the traditional majority groups will be minorities. We have to make our student body, we need to make our faculty body look like the communities of the future. And we should be learning in those environments. And to do that, we're proposing something that we're calling the Q Entrance Assistant Program, KEEP, which is a high-touch admissions program for first-generation students, high school students from economically disadvantaged areas, students with English as a second language, community college transfers, veterans. Students who may not naturally choose QU as their destination, we want to make it seamless for those students to come into our community and to succeed, to encourage readiness for QU and for other universities if that's where they choose to go. And of course, financial assistance and strong mentoring are critical to enable these students to enter and to succeed. And our population of teachers and staff must mirror the diversity that we're talking about in the community. Our third goal in the plan centers on nurturing and having impact on internal, local, and global communities. But first, for that, we need to take care of ourselves. So here is a critical initiative under this goal, and that is that we'll build state-of-the-art health and wellness services through a health and wellness center with activities and programming that support student health, physical fitness, counseling, and ongoing wellness and prevention education. So a place where we can really build wellness, not just for our students while they're here, but a foundation for the rest of their life. Spiritual wellness through program is also very important. As part of that goal, we need to have a facilities master plan to address the many space shortages that support learning, development, research, community spaces for you to meet in, that you can have an experience, an intellectual experience, a social experience that meets all of your broad needs as students. We also have to be more deeply embedded in the regional ecosystem with community colleges, government and community-based organizations, with companies who are in our classes and we're in their facilities because they're shaping the future of jobs and they're helping us shape education to meet that. Our fourth goal, fourth and last, is to create lifelong connections and success for our alumni. This means that we need to be more active partners with our alumni throughout the course of their lives, early stage in their career, middle stage, as they're executives and as they approach retirement. And by having deeper connections with our alumni and graduates, we will not just help them upskill and reskill throughout their life, but we will help them develop the ongoing pride in the institution, the fact that they'll want to give back and come back to the institution, and also help us philanthropically. So an example of an initiative that advances this goal is what we call the Quinnipiac Academic and Career Advising Center. And if you make an acronym out of this, it's a very ugly acronym. It's QUACAC. Sounds like a duck. QUACAC. Which will be an integrated advising center that starts with academic advising from the day you arrive as freshmen, helping you through the planning of your curriculum, through any needs you might have during the time you're here, to career advising for your first job. And then once you graduate, early stage career advising, mid-stage, and so forth. And over time, you'll be coming back to upskill, reskill, because we need to be in a world where lifelong learning is part of the is part of your career success. And then one day, as you prepare for retirement. So this is a connection in perpetuity between our alumni and their alma mater to help them with their professional lives, personal lives, to mid-career, to retirement. So those are the four pillars, four goals of the strategic plan, with example initiatives, many more initiatives. A lot of fundraising will be needed, a lot of resource reallocation, but we're very excited about that vision, that future, which will position us as a first choice among students because we are the university of the future, in touch with companies, agile around change, connected to our students and alumni for life, and really preparing them to be enlightened citizens for careers of the 21st century. And your thoughts and your ideas and your feedback and your input into this plan are going to be crucial as we move towards completion of the plan and then ultimately execution. Let me just mention a couple of other pieces of news. I want to thank Ryan and Luke, who was on the committee that helped us navigate through the change to the no smoking environment. I think that's a really important change that is consistent with our goal of nurturing community. We are a much healthier environment as a non-smoking environment. We recognize that for some, this is a difficult transition, and we want to help, but we think that generally speaking, this will make for a much healthier community with a foundation of healthy living. All of us are key in championing inclusive excellence, and each of us is a champion of inclusive excellence in our own lives and in the lives around us. So last week, Blair Taylor, former director of My Brother's Keeper under President Obama, spoke. Today, Don Sawyer's guest is Richard Edmund Vargas, who's the co-founder of Initiate Justice. And we're also delighted to mention that the School of Communication received a grant from the Hearst Foundation of $500,000 for underrepresented scholarships among their students. And finally, one other piece of news is that our student athletes are doing wonderfully. Our women's basketball team is undefeated, 10-0 in the MAC conference. They're ranked #1 in the conference. And our men's hockey team is ranked #4 in the country. This is a big weekend for both, with the men on ice playing Yale and then Brown, and the women will be playing Niagara today or tomorrow, and Canisius on Sunday maybe. And then next Sunday, something that I'm not familiar with, but I'm really keen to see their opening competition, is the acrobatics and tumbling team, and I think they were runner-ups, national runner-ups last year for the competition. So lots happening here, lots to be excited about and proud of, and I think we should open it up to questions. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Luke.
Thank you very much, President Olian. Before we begin, I'd like to say that a lot of these questions came from a recent survey that the Student Government Association sent out that got around 1,000 respondents. To submit any questions that you want asked to the administrators on this panel today, feel free to follow the instructions on the screen over there, and you can also upvote questions that you would like to see asked. So without further ado, we'll just jump right into questions. This is a recent question that was just submitted by a student. Are you aware of the petition circulating in support of WQUN that nearly 800 community members have signed? Will the outpouring of support change your decision to close it?
I guess that's me. Well, first of all, any decision to change course is difficult. Change is difficult. When we think about our future strategy and the need to move and invest in new things, I don't think that any university, even the wealthiest of universities, can simply add on and keep adding things on without ever examining and re-examining what we're doing. We talk about being the university of the future. We also need to examine everything that we're doing in the past to see if it's still relevant. Bethany Zemba, Dr. Bethany Zemba here is the VP and Chief of Staff and also in charge of town gown relations. We've looked very closely at this issue and also with Lynn Bushnell, who's the VP for Marketing and Communications. And AM radio is no longer a very well listened to outlet, In fact, audience has gone down dramatically for AM. The QU has sports broadcasting that is broadcast on the internet, so it's not as if there isn't another angle for consumption of those programs. When we established WQUN, we did it because of the learning objectives of our students in communication, that they were doing internships and really preparing for careers in AM broadcasting. For the last few years, we've only had 1 or 2 interns that have actually applied for the role. And when we consulted with the dean of the School of Communications, he said that this was really not a valued use of resources because students in communication were going in other directions. And lastly, as an indication of market interest, advertising dollars are a key indicator of that, and that has declined significantly. So there's no question that this is a difficult decision, but when you look at the core purposes of what we're trying to do in serving our students' current and future needs, and the recognition that we can't just keep adding on expenditures without reallocating. And so we ask, is this something that's a very current need and interest for our students' development, career development, educational development? And the data, and these are data that go back 2, 3, 4 years, indicate that students are no longer expressing interest in that.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from the student body as well, from a recent survey we sent out. Every year, the student body is told that club sports are on the horizon. Knowing that this is something students want now and have wanted for years, what is the specific timeline for club sports, and is the university prepared to officially commit to club sports on this campus?
So I'll mention one thing and then we'll talk about timelines. So I'm a huge fan of club sports, I'll just say that. Now, now, let's go for it.
Is this on? Sounds like we have presidential endorsement of the proposal that we presented. Club sports are on the horizon. That's what we say every year, right? But the horizon is getting closer and closer. So I can't give you a specific date, but we do have a specific proposal right now that we're evaluating that has the costs associated with it, the resources we need to commit to it. We're looking into the logistics necessary to make sure everything's in place to be able to host club sports, the array of club sports to ensure that we are in compliance with Title IX in terms of the distribution between male and female opportunities in club sports. So I do expect to be able to give you a positive response in the future. I think it would be a plus for the university to offer it. You obviously, as a student body, have requested it every year. You're correct in saying that. But I think it's a plus in terms of recruiting students. I also think it's a plus in terms of retaining students as a way to have you connected to something that's of value to all of you. So we're much closer, and I promise next time I talk about it, it will come with a specific commitment and a date in terms of the types of sports we'll offer to get started and also when they will get started.
Yeah, please also understand that it's not just a financial thing, it's logistics. What times do people, can we make the fields available for club sports as opposed to the team sports to practice on? And since we don't have lights and don't have approval for lights on the field, as much as we would love that, that's the challenge logistically. But we're working on it and we want to see that happen.
Thank you very much. Our next question is, Quinnipiac prides itself on global citizenship. However, much of our student body has apathetic tendencies. As we move forward, are there plans to cultivate activism on this campus and across the global community?
Hello. Okay. So one of the things I've talked about with, even some colleagues in student affairs and some of the students is about this sense of apathy among the student body. And so one of the things that, I have been doing is kind of working with students to kind of getting them to understand that their voice is important. And so one of the other things that's happening is through the speakers that we're going to be bringing, and one of the things that President Olian has talked about is to have us create an environment where we can have discussions about topics that we don't necessarily always agree with, because I think as a society we've kind of moved away from having these discussions when we don't necessarily agree on specific topics. And so some students have also asked for the ability to have trainings on what it means to be an activist and to be active on campus, and so some of those things are going to be coming as well. Students have pointed to the ways in which other people have developed movements, and a lot of people who develop movements are trained to do so. And so as we start to develop a curriculum in my area, some of these things will be on that list.
Thank you very much. Many students have expressed that the cost of Quinnipiac does not match the student experience. While we are aware that this is a national issue, are there any immediate ways or initiatives other than the strategic plan that plan to match the student experience to the cost of attendance?
Can you hear me? Yeah. So you can see that the tough questions are coming down this end of the table. So I can't accept the qualifier other than the strategic plan in the question, because I think that's the whole point of the plan. So what I'm going to ask Dr. Zinn to give you some of the current statistics on the student experience and the outcomes we're achieving currently. But the whole point of the strategic plan is to address that concern about the tuition that we charge and the fees that we charge, and making sure that you get the appropriate value from that investment. So if you take a look at the plan, it includes consideration about the types of programs that we offer. We want to transition to ones that do reflect job opportunities, fields of the future, to make sure that you have the ability to pursue different career opportunities than you do now. The way in which we engage you in the classroom to move towards more experiential and applied learning. We know that your generation in particular does not respond well to what you're currently experiencing, right? This is more of a lecture format. You would prefer to be engaged in the conversation, the learning process. The facilities, in terms of student programming, the opportunities for programming, the types of programming that you offer, the types of classrooms that you're learning within, the community connections that we can make to open up different opportunities for you for learning experiences and potential connections for internships and jobs, the employer relationships. I mean, it's just such a lengthy list of things, and the entire point of the exercise is to benefit you as a student body. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Zinn, and she'll give you just a couple of statistics in terms of where we are now.
Yes, so I have some good news for you, because first of all, the outcomes that Quinnipiac students achieve are awesome, and especially when we compare them to competitor institutions and also to national institutions. So I'll give you some statistics, and I'd be delighted at any time to talk further. So one of the key measures that I know many students care about, many parents care about, is the career success rate, which is measured 6 months after graduation for graduating seniors. So for class of 2017, it was 98%, which is one of the highest ever, because nationally it was 81%. If we look then at different aggregations of institutions, so master's universities across the country, it was in the 80s, private institutions across the country. If we look exclusively within New England, it is at 93%, so it's higher. It drops in Mid-Atlantic. But even if we compare our rates with those of institutions that are geographically similar, similar types of programs that also are high cost, say for example Fairfield, they've been no higher than 96%. We've consistently been higher. So that's a pretty powerful metric, considering that by any dimension we look at it, the career success rate of students employed or in grad school 6 months after graduation is higher. So that's why I say it's an awesome outcome. If we look at our professional programs, licensure exams, which are key, consistently the pass rates are above national averages. They're generally in the 90s, upper 90s too. So we're talking about really solid rates that you can be sure of. And also if we look at the student experience, you get surveys periodically. They're incredibly important to fill out. So one of the key ones is the National Survey of Student Engagement. And we compare ourselves to competitor institutions in the admissions process, both private and public. So we really get a good sense of what are our students saying about the student experience compared to the institutions we compete with. So I'll just say a few things. In terms of ratings of the quality of interactions, the frequency, and also the helpfulness and value of student-faculty interactions, advisor interactions, administrator support staff, consistently higher among Quinnipiac students. You're telling us that we've got a community that's out for you to help you and all that. So if we look at also high-impact practices, our rates of completion are higher. Internships is a really critical one, and every year we actually improve on that. But of our class of 2008 seniors, 73% reported that they completed an internship or a practical experience in their field. If we compare ourselves nationally, it was only 49% of graduating seniors. Among our competitor institutions, public institutions, yes, they are lower cost, but only 56% were saying that they had an opportunity to complete an internship. It's higher at private at 71, but still we've been consistently higher than the very schools we compete with. And of course there's a lot more I could go through, and I'm happy to do it anytime. The whole point is that if we look at what you're achieving, what we're providing, so in comparison to the cost, we're consistently at the higher end and actually performing even better on many of these statistics than institutions that may be higher ranked than us. So there's pretty solid data on that.
Thank you very much. Historically, students have not always felt part of or heard by the facilities planning process. How does the university plan to incorporate students' needs and voices into the process as it develops a master plan?
Hello. The master planning process is a university-wide process, very similar to the strategic planning. So the process isn't finalized yet, but I would expect that we'll have multiple opportunities for students to be engaged through surveys, through independent groups that we kind of reach out to, different constituencies among the students to find out what their thoughts on different facilities are, and town forums similar to this type of environment.
Thank you. Students have expressed that the Catholic Chapel and the Center for Religion feel exclusive to only Catholic students. What are the university's plans to either make that space more open and welcoming for all students, or create more spaces, that create more spaces that are welcoming to all religions on campus?
Thank you. I'll take that one. First, I think it's really important that everyone knows we are absolutely committed to creating a space that is welcome for all of our students. And the Center for Religion does do that. It is open and completely for the whole fall semester as well as the spring semester. They've received requests from outside organizations outside of the Catholic community to host events there. The Muslim Student Association, Fraternity and Sorority Life. There's been, I'm trying to think of several others that have used that space in the past 6 months or so. So we absolutely are willing to do that. I think what I'd love to hear too is what could be more helpful? If you don't feel like that's a welcoming environment, what would be helpful to that? And certainly Father Jordan, who's in the back, wave your hand, Father Jordan, is the executive director of that space in the Center for Religion, and I think he is absolutely open to learning and hearing from students. I think there's a commitment to making sure that it is a welcoming environment, and we've done so, but we'd love to hear how we can do better at that.
Thank you. What are the 3 most and least important financial priorities of this university?
I would say that for us, in the strategic plan, what we're looking at is to build the academic distinctions of the university, because that, first and foremost, is the reason that people come to Quinnipiac. It's not so much cost per se. I know cost is important, but it's always about the value proposition. am I going to my first choice university given all of the other things, which are cost and residential facilities, etc. So I would say that the academic distinctions, the support that we have for programs of the future would be the most important. A second really big priority for us is the well-being of our students. It isn't just encapsulated in the Wellness Center and the programming around the Wellness Center, but that is a big part, because there will be programming in the Wellness Center around nutrition, around stress management, around time management, in addition to the physical fitness, the physical well-being, and the emotional well-being of our students. So I would say that that's another really important priority. A third really important priority is just the, if you will allow me the phrase, cradle-to-grave advising, starting with the minute you get here and then continuing on through the arc of your professional and personal lives, through the first job, the second, third, mid-career, etc. And that is connecting you to the institution, helping you advance in your life, helping you come back and learn as you go. Because I hate to tell you, graduation is not what it's not what it's promised. You're not going to be able to close your books when you graduate. In fact, it's commencement. It's the beginning, it's the commencement of a lifelong of learning. And we need to be your partner of choice. And of course, financial aid, making sure that learning is accessible to a broad spectrum of students who want to come here. So those would be the broad buckets of priorities, financial priorities for the institution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's a feeling among...
Can I add one?
Absolutely.
I'll add one, and this is also in the mix, and that's upgrading the residential hall facilities. And I mean not just how you live and sleep in your rooms, but it's how you meet, how you act, congregate. It's also the kinds of extracurricular opportunities you have through the residential living facilities. Do we have neat stuff for you to do when you're on York Hill? Do we have really interesting speakers that are part of your residential experience, that are stimulating, that are provocative, that are sometimes uncomfortable? Dr. Sawyer talked about the fact that we want to have a diversity of ideas here that are not necessarily familiar to us. We need to be provoked into thinking in ways that we don't think. And it could be quite uncomfortable, but that makes us a broader, more open-minded person. So that the residential facilities, and I might mention air conditioning, is one of those other priorities in the residential facilities. Thank you, Luke.
I know everybody likes to hear that. There's a feeling among students that public safety investigations are unfair in regards to students' procedural rights. Will public safety work to establish specific procedural guidelines for investigations?
Of course. I mean, this is the first I've heard of the concern, so this is something I'm more than happy to look into to get a deeper understanding as to why that's the sense of things, and I'm happy to address it. But unfortunately, I didn't know it was an issue until now, and it's always helpful to know an issue exists. It helps me to be able to respond to it. So thanks for bringing it to my attention, but I'd be happy to follow up.
Thank you. Recognizing that Quinnipiac is a predominantly female student body, in what ways can the university empower women as they are currently entering the workforce and while they are still on campus?
So I think this is an important topic, and maybe I can give you one example of one of the things that we're doing, and perhaps President Olian can add to it. I think a good example of our commitment to assisting women in particular in some of their unique needs. We know that women continue to have challenges in various aspects of the labor market, for example. So we have established our Center for Women in Business, and that's one of the things that is now, over the course of the next couple of years, will be fully endowed in terms of the funding support that came from the People's United Bank agreement. It's an interest of the bank as well as the university, obviously. And what the intent of that as a center is to provide our female students with the opportunity to connect with mentors from the surrounding community, to have the availability of programs and resources available to them, leadership development types of opportunities, but it's one example of where I think we've made a major step in the right direction in providing the support to our female student body. You want to add to it?
I would. I have always believed in the power of role models, and we do have a very important presence among the leadership ranks of the university, and I'm not talking about myself, but probably is relevant to the president is a woman. But I think having role models among the leadership ranks is very important, and we have many female faculty in the classroom, female mentors. I also think that the presence of female student athletes and the predominance, I mean, as you know, Title IX requires proportionality, and so we have proportionality that is skewed towards female athletes. And I think that kind of sense of empowerment, I see little girls going to basketball and soccer games and watching women ice hockey. That's a role model for every person who sees that, including women, and from the youngest age on. So what I want to make sure of is that we have speakers who are successful, who are leaders, who happen to be women, who happen to be from non-traditional groups. I think it's very important for us to see success in every form.
Much. The next question was recently submitted by a student. Does the strategic plan mention new pathways to buildings/facilities? Currently, there is no pathway to the Albert Schweitzer Institute, and it is a safety concern for students, faculty, and staff.
That's something that's specifically identified in a strategic plan, but that will be part of the master planning process. So the master planning isn't just about buildings, it's about the campuses and the university as a whole. So it'll look at pathways, roadways, parking, all those types of things in addition to facilities.
Thank you. The next question also comes from a student in the audience. What steps is Quinnipiac taking to decrease dropout and transfer rates for students of color?
So one of the important aspects of the strategic plan addresses this specifically. So it includes, there's three components to it. There's the admissions practices and policies that we seek to change those in ways that will help us to draw in a more diverse student population. And then the second component of it includes a transitional program in which we would offer opportunities in the summer for those who wish to avail themselves of it. So this transition from high school to college is one that's much easier. And then the third part of it is to have professional advisors who are greater diversity among those advisors, as well as having the appropriate student development training to support diverse students going forward. So it's a three-pronged approach, and not the least of which, in terms of importance, is the retention piece.
So I think the retention piece is key, right? Because a lot of work, if you look at people talking about diversifying campus, many people focus on the numbers that are coming in, right? Like you get the numbers that are coming in, but the numbers coming in, if they're not maintained, the needle never moves, right? Because it becomes a revolving door. People who come to a campus then end up leaving the campus, right? And so you have a revolving door. And so one of the things, like when we talk about role models, like if you've ever been to a space where you don't feel comfortable, and I think Mr. Blair Taylor talked about this, like putting yourself in a position where you go into a space where you are the only one of your particular identity and seeing how that feels, right? And then you can kind of understand the plight of other people who experience that on a day-to-day basis. In addition to the diversification of the student body, we have to do it through diversification of the faculty and of the staff, because when students start to see themselves at a place, they're more likely to stay at that place. When a student feels that they're not included or involved in the functioning of that institution, they tend to leave the institution. And so remember that the diversity piece is getting people here, but the inclusion piece is the active piece. The inclusion piece is the active involvement of the diversity that you bring to a campus. And so that's what we're going to be working on, the inclusion piece, and not just focusing on the numbers coming in.
Thank you very much. As we increase efforts to grow our student population outside of the East Coast and the United States, how does Quinnipiac plan to accommodate and better serve these students? For example, over breaks, Easter weekend, access to airports, etc.
So I personally would love to have a direct flight to the West Coast right from Tweed Airport. I don't know if I can make that happen. So seriously, first of all, one of the ways in which we address the prior question is also to diversify the applicant pools that are coming into the university for inclusive excellence. And we know that the Northeast is a relatively saturated marketplace for higher education. It's not that diverse, and it's also a shrinking demographic pool because of the demographic declines of college-aged education. So early on, we brought a consultant in earlier this year, and we recognized that for inclusive excellence reasons and for continuing the high quality of our student body, we needed to diversify the geography of where we go to. So we've created a real campaign to enter Florida. Florida, Texas, and California are the most diverse and growing pools of applicants. So we have created an approach strategy into Florida using social media. Texas, not so much yet, because Texas as a state has policies that keep Texans in Texas. Is there anyone here from Texas? I rest my case. And then we've talked about going into California, and we're starting to dip our toe in the water. One of the ways in which we're branding Quinnipiac is with the poll. How many of you noticed the poll before you came to Quinnipiac? Right. So Quinnipiac University poll has been doing polling in Florida among swing states, but it issued its first poll 2 days ago in California as a way of starting to brand ourselves as Quinnipiac University in a new state as a potential source of new applicants. So first of all, that's the applicant pool side. So now what do we do to make ourselves attractive and friendly to applicant pools from non-neighboring states? Well, we do have to have residential facilities that are open over breaks, over the summer, and that's clearly a plan that we're looking at also for other purposes like summer camps. But I think the thing to remember is broadening our geography is very good for diversity purposes, for point of view perspectives, for quality perspectives, and then we have to follow through with, as you say, the facilities.
Thank you. Our next question is administration satisfied with the FYS program, and can students expect any changes with that program moving forward?
So I'm never satisfied, is the answer. I'm committed to continuous quality improvement. And I think over the course of time, we have seen by our measures of our learning outcomes, particularly around helping you understand the importance of an inquiry-based approach to education. So you're constantly questioning and seeking answers to various problems and seeking different perspectives and answers to those issues. So we have, over the last 3 years, there's been a significant increase in the quality of instructors in terms of what's reported back to us through the course evaluations that you all freshmen submit to us. So we've seen a substantial improvement in terms of those being rated excellent on the scale. We're seeing an improvement in the learning outcomes as part of the process, but no, I'm not satisfied. We need to continue to improve that. One of the things that we're doing in the coming year is we are committing, we've added to the budget already our commitment to hire 10 new full-time equivalents to which will cover about 40% of the FYS classes. So we are seeking high-quality full-time personnel to undertake a close look at FYS to deliver it in a quality way. And in addition to that, they'll be providing some advising and support services to freshmen, and they'll also help us in terms of our needs with full-time delivery of the university curriculum in the spring. So the answer is no, but we're going to continue to work to improve it.
Thank you. The next question also comes from the audience. Many spaces have been taken from students to create other resources. What actions are being taken to provide more spaces for organizational programs, including the noise controlled by Starbucks for events like this in the Piazza?
So I think that's definitely a master planning issue. So one of the things that we've tried to do as we shifted priorities is make sure that we had the right spaces for things and what's important. And the example I always use is a conference room, right? So we can meet as a group in a conference room almost anywhere. You can walk across the quad, so it doesn't have to be right in the space that it is. So if there's a more compelling need for that space, then we might convert the conference room to something else. I think Starbucks is a good example. That used to be a meeting room, and there was an SGA proposal actually to bring Starbucks to campus, and though we looked at putting it over in the dining side of it, it would have just been Starbucks coffee and not a Starbucks experience, and that was the right place to put it. I think the challenges of the noise is something to revisit if it becomes a large problem. I think one of the reasons we like that space was because it doesn't limit the experience to just that room. There's seating. If you go in there, it's just like a Starbucks, but you can also flow out to the other seating. You can flow out to this entire space with your coffee and meet with your friends and others. So we do try to, for the spaces that we have, maximize the potential of them. And I think as part of the master planning, we've already discussed where we need more space and classrooms and student meeting spaces. So that'll definitely be one of the issues as we build out the rest of campus.
And folks, this is a real world. There are rarely black and white decisions. You're usually making decisions which are in the gray zone. And this is a gray zone decision where clearly there are people that are thrilled to have Starbucks and don't care about the other repurposing that occurred. And there are others that say, well, what about my conference room, and et cetera. So that's why when you become managers and leaders, they'll be paying you the big bucks to make those difficult decisions, which usually don't have those kinds of clear-cut answers. But you're making the best decisions under scarce resources, under scarce information, under uncertainty.
Thank you. And so as we approach 5 o'clock, there's one more segment almost that we wanted to incorporate into this year's State of the QUnion. Some of these might sound a little bit wonky, but these are all myths that the students have heard, and I think it's appropriate that students want to know the answers to some of these. So one of the first myths that students are often heard talking about is that if you get hit by a car or cart on campus, you get free tuition.
I think if that were true, you'd see a lot more students jumping in front of cars and carts. So that is false.
Our next myth is that the trees in the pine grove are protected land.
So the trees in the pine grove are not locally or federally protected. I think we thought of the pine grove as a great asset, a feature of campus until May when a tornado took most of it down, but they're not. That's false. They're not protected.
Another common myth around Quinnipiac is that we are not able to build taller than the clock tower.
So all building is governed by building codes, local codes, state codes, planning and zoning regulations, and there are planning and zoning regulations that limit the height of structures. It depends on the structure. It depends on where you're trying to build it, and also there are procedures in place to get variances to go above the zoning limitations if the zoning board thinks that's appropriate.
Another common legend at Quinnipiac is that the reason Quinnipiac doesn't have a football team is that there was a donor who specified as part of their donation that the university would never have a football team.
False.
And another common one that we hear, and we actually see some evidence of this one, is that Quinnipiac wants to join the Big East.
Sure. That'd be great, but I think we've got a few steps along the way. I think moving to the MAC conference was from the NEC was a big deal. We continue to look at conference opportunities that would likely move us into something in between this and the Big East, but the Big East, of course, is a stretch. So I think probably we'll continue to evaluate opportunities and do what's in the best interest of our university going forward.
Well, and we're investing in the teams that are attractive to the Big East, especially men's basketball. Obviously, we have a great women's basketball team, and we'll continue to promote and champion the teams that make us stand out in the MAC, and then maybe move.
I think the important thing is whatever conference you're in, you want to have a winning situation, go into the NCAA finals like we've had our women's basketball team do. And in addition, of course, as Luke kind of alluded to, we are in the Big East with our women's field hockey team.
And then the last myth that we would like to know about is that trash and recycling go to the same place at this university.
So that's not always a university decision. So it is one-step recycling program locally that we participate in, and most of the time, even, and I've been at other institutions where this has happened also, even when we separate and we bring it to the facility, they mix it back together. So depending on where you are and what opportunities out there are for recycling, sometimes that is the case where things are mixed together.
I'd like to just add that the one common item of feedback that we've gotten from the strategic plan is a desire to see a strengthening of our sustainability efforts on campus. And I think that this is very true of our student body, of our faculty, of our staff. And that's something that we want to do collaboratively with you. And if we can lead the way in making sure that we live in protecting the resources of the planet internally to the campus, about how we use paper and how we turn lights off and how we recycle and how, for example, our vehicles are powered and how our buildings are powered. We can do a lot on our own. We can't do it overnight. But we'll have an initiative that will include the students on an ongoing basis to turn our campus into a model for sustainable resources.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have here today. We have plenty more questions, but we will maybe get to them at the event next year. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to the students for coming out. And everybody have a great day. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. It was great.
And I hope we answered them in a way that
Absolutely.
helpful
Yeah.
and transparent. My pleasure. It was really instructive.
Wait, you were singing that?
Hello and welcome back to the State of the QUnion live stream here on Q30 television. I'm joined now by Monique Drucker, the Vice President and Dean of Students, and Sal Filardi, the Vice President for Facilities and Capital Planning. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
So initial thoughts after the event will go one by one. Monique, what do you think your initial thoughts are following the State of the QUnion and any new things you learned based on questions asked?
Sure. I thought it was a good event. I think it's always great as an opportunity as an administrator to hear what the student concerns are. You may have watched, I was taking some notes because it's always good for us to understand what's on the top of your minds, how can we help address it. So I thought overall it was a really great event. Well run.
Sal?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's interesting, and you heard at least once where, well, we never heard of that before. And so if we're not listening and we don't hear things, sometimes students, I think, assume that we know something is a concern of theirs, and we don't always.
I think something alluded to throughout the entire event, and President Olian said it, or Thompson said it, and I know, Sal, you said it, the facilities master plan. Could you highlight maybe the biggest points in the facilities master plan, or what students could look forward to as a result of that plan being created?
So the facilities master plan will actually follow the strategic plan. So there isn't one. Well, that's part of the problem. So we will develop one probably over the next 12 months, where we look at the entire university, all three campuses, look at, not only facilities as in buildings and spaces, but, outdoor spaces, walkways, roadways, parkways, like I mentioned earlier. And the goal of it is really to kind of set the framework for when we invest, where we invest. So it might have, we're going to build building A, B, and C to do these three different things, and the first priority is to get building A done.
Mm-hmm. Something talking about facilities being available and kind of reallocating our resources. President Olian talked about increasing in programming and looking at the services we provide. She talked about QUnion is closing. Are there any plans, maybe Monique, you know this from a student life perspective, to change that building into something student life related? Or Sal, is there some sort of other plan that's currently in the works for that building?
So no, it's all a relatively new decision. I think there's some sensitivity to, let's wait till that runs its course before we consider that. And the right way to do that is put that as an available space in the facilities master plan, and what makes the most sense to go there, we'll end up going there.
Monique, what are your thoughts on, a potential student opportunity that wasn't really being taken advantage of according to the information provided, closing?
Closing the
QUnion, yep.
It goes back to what President Olian said, is again the impetus in the beginning of having that is fostering the learning and the engagement, and when that is waning, and just when you look in general at how our students are engaging and interacting and our community with media, it makes sense to me. I'm always going to advocate for opportunities for students, but I can also say, been here 23 years, and look at this, didn't exist. So I'm terribly proud of our student media, where we've come. When I first started, we had a radio station, and now we have television, we have so many different mediums that I think that's great, because we're doing it as students, you're doing it on your own, and so I think you'll continue to push us and challenge us, and so we can invest in the student organizations and what they're doing. So, I think that's always an opportunity for us to continue to do that.
So positively, we saw the traditional question of club sports come up, and we got some really positive feedback on that. It received an enthusiastic yes from President Olian that club sports, do belong on this campus. What progress is being made, maybe from a student opportunity perspective, or the plans for the new York Hill Athletic Center? What's the status on kind of those two things happening?
So the York Hill Athletic Center, that's a track and field facility. That's something that we've looked at and planned in the past. It's really not something that's actively being pursued today. Again, I think that's part of the master planning process, the need for that, whether there is one or isn't one. And that happens regularly through, we do what's called feasibility studies, where we look at the feasibility of building out a space for some need, and feasibility studies don't always turn into actual built projects.
And just specifically in the strategic plan, it outlined a new recreation center and a new health and wellness center.
Right.
Do you have any maybe specific details that you could give us on those two?
No, that is something that we're beginning planning now. We're actually sourcing
architectural firms to help us with the planning for that. And that is obviously an important initiative, and so that's one of our top priorities. So even though the master plan will identify everything, there's a few things we're kind of got out in front of it a little too, because we know we want to do them. Not only that facility, but we're also looking at residential life. Judy mentioned that today, where we're starting out with a small look at a few buildings to try to make some immediate impact, and then essentially a residential life master plan, which would be part of the bigger facilities master plan, would look at all the buildings and all the amenities in the buildings and how we can improve res halls to make it a better experience for students.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Monique, as part of your position, you oversee residential life. Something that was mentioned last year, and it wasn't brought up tonight, was that a new residence hall in York Hill was approved. How do you see residential life kind of transforming over the next few years to support the residential and student experience here?
Sure. So I think exactly what Sal said. One thing we know is that our buildings, some of our buildings, can use some attention, and we're working on that together to really take a look at how can we best improve the student experience in the residence halls from a facility standpoint, which we know will attract and satisfy them, and then also from a programming and a curriculum standpoint. And so those are some of the things that we're working on daily to make sure that we're providing the residential experience that our students want. And I think having some updated and some renovations, some different touches with that, and looking at the full strategic plan and working in cooperation with Sal to identify what buildings need some extra touches and what does that look like, that can only enhance it. So I think together we're going to be looking at some really good changes and positive things that will help retain our students. We really want them to stay on campus. I want them. We have some spaces for them to be here. We want them to engage and to be a part of it. And so we're really diligently looking at all the ways in which we can help foster that.
And I think you kind of alluded, you want students to stay on campus. Are there any steps being taken, and as we know in the past, town gown relationships with Hamden, students moving out into the community may be a little bit rocky. Are there any initiatives coming down the line to make sure that those students stay on campus, besides building new buildings?
Sure. I think it's more than just that. It's all of what we just said, is really listening and hearing from students what would make your experience here better. Why do those who choose to stay, why? What can we continue to do to enhance that? And that's what we're currently doing, is really identifying what's out there, what's working, and what's not. What do we need to change? What kind of, whether it's processes, policies, furniture, that kind of stuff. So we're really actively engaging in all of that, as that's part of the plan and the strategic plan. But most importantly, as Sal said, this is just another large component of that. And I think the health and wellness, I think all of that adds to it. So when we're able to add value at that, and a nice new recreation center that people can have fitness and access to that, that's going to be also attractive, because you're going to want to be here and close to the campus to be able to have access to that. So I think all of that will contribute to a better experience for our residential students.
Mm-hmm. And towards the end of the State of the QUnion, we discovered that the Pine Grove is not protected land, but we do know that the Pine Grove was pretty devastated by the recent tornado that came through campus, as were some other buildings on the campus. Do we have any plans to regrow trees in the Pine Grove or redevelop that space for a different use?
Well, in our previous planning, what we do, when you do a master plan, you identify potential building sites. So the Pine Grove was always a potential building site, but it was one that I think we shied away from because the asset of the Pine Grove was so nice. It really was devastated by the tornado, and it's a shell of its former self. It's really just a couple of pine trees. It's not really a pine grove anymore. And so I think it just becomes a more viable building site, and the connection between the main quad and College of Arts and Sciences, if there were a building there, that would make that flow a little better. So I think it becomes a more viable building site, but we don't have any plan specifically at this time to put a specific building there.
Well, Monique and Sal, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you.
Sure.
And now we're going to toss it over to Brooke Riley, who caught up with a few students earlier today on what they hope to be talked about tonight at the State of the QUnion.
Brooke Riley here. Earlier today, I spoke with students to see what kind of topics they'd like to see discussed at today's State of the Union.
I'd like to see more of an initiative to kind of create a safe environment for mental health conversations around campus. I think it's very important for students to feel comfortable talking about what might be bothering them, and overall that just creates a better environment for just everyone day-to-day life. I play basketball, and I hope we could have a club basketball team. We've already been kind of building towards that. We've been playing other schools, so I'm hoping maybe we could get a little more funding from the school. I know some of our players have been trying to go for that, so I'd be very happy about that.
We're in an interesting place where Quinnipiac is getting more noticed. It's getting larger. There's more departments, more schools within the university. And so it's curious to see, or I'm curious to see where that will go from here.
I feel like the biggest thing that would need to be changed would be the dorms. I live in a quad, and that's not the most ideal situation.
Putting out a lot of surveys, which I know they have been doing because I've been getting a lot of emails, but just like, I guess, more continuous surveys about it.
I think my biggest complaint here is just like how late the dining hall is open, because like I don't really enjoy the food at the Rat, and then like I usually eat at like 8 at my house, but it closes at 8, so it's like tough, and like it messes up with my schedule.
And what type of questions did you have coming into the State of the Union? Did you think of any prior, or?
One of the big questions that I had was about club sports and what to address, and they are thinking about it here. I know a lot of students here at QU are thinking about that as well.
Right, so over 2 years now, the question about club sports has come up on and on. Do you think now finally, after they really addressed it this time, they're going to be all here? And
yeah, I think definitely, like, after hearing what they said today, it's definitely on their mind, and like definitely, maybe not top on their list, but a priority. And maybe not this coming semester or next year, but I definitely think in a few years to come that we'll have like what we're looking for.
Okay, and what club sport are you?
Probably volleyball or soccer, kind of up for whatever. I used to play in high school, so
okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
So, what other questions do you think? I mean, they talked a lot about the price of Quinnipiac, and they talked about how the student body isn't diverse. I mean, do either of those things, I mean, do those affect you?
Yeah, I think a lot of students are concerned about the price, especially when the tuition kind of goes up and maybe they're not seeing the changes that they want on campus. But overall, I think that President Olian and the rest of the administrative staff are kind of doing what they need to do to get everything getting in place and making the increase in tuition worth it.
Okay, and do you know any of your friends that had like questions that they were like dying to get answered that didn't get answered?
I know a lot of people probably wanted to hear more, definitely about like air conditioning in the dorms, and also like classroom space is starting to become a little bit of an issue. A lot of the times kids will have classes maybe in sailing, that sort of thing, and it's not really ideal. So I think those are two topics that maybe more people wanted to hear about.
Right. So overall, do you think the event was a success, or do you think that the panel didn't really answer all the questions students had?
No, yeah, I definitely think it was successful. But again, they can't really give us all the specifics that we want. It's not that easy. But yeah, I think they did a great job answering our questions.
Right. Now, looking forward into next year, do you think that some of the questions are going to be reoccurring, or do you think that a lot of what they said will be out and like done with?
I think definitely a lot of the questions will be recurring just because they're not like one-step fixes. It's kind of going to take a little bit of time, despite what the students here at QU want. But yeah, I think these problems, they're not going to be quick fixes. It's going to be a recurring issue, but eventually they will get solved.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So stick with us while the live stream continues.
Nice job.
Thank you for staying with us for Q30's live stream from the State of the QUnion. I'm joined now by members of Student Government Association to kind of give a student perspective on the topics that were discussed tonight. I have Allison Kuhn, the Senior Class Vice President, Austin Calvo, the Vice President for Student Experience, Brianna Wyman, a Senator for the sophomore class, and Alec Williams, the Freshman Class President. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
So kind of just going down the line, I just kind of want to get everyone's thoughts on what they thought about the event tonight and the topics discussed.
Well, personally, I thought the administrators did a great job answering questions. I didn't feel like they dodged any tough questions. They took them straight on. I really appreciated how President Olian said at one point, you know, she's for club sports. I know that's something that we've missed in the past and a huge factor missing on campus. So just hearing the president's verbal approval of something like that gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Awesome.
The biggest thing for me, I would say, is just the transparency that the panel kind of displayed today, as well as that President Olian is looking for in her strategic plan. Like I think that was one of Leahy's biggest criticisms, was that he wasn't transparent with what the university was doing, and President Olian has definitely put an effort forth to be transparent with everything the university is doing now, which is awesome.
Brianna?
I think it's a really great way for the students to get their voice out there. I know everyone has issues and they want their voice to be heard, and this is a great opportunity for them to take a step and actually ask them live questions and have one-on-one answers with the administrators. And I think students should take a bigger role in this and take it as an opportunity to bring change to the campus. And I think this is a good step in the right direction, and having President Olian here was really a big accomplishment for us, and I think we're on the right steps to making Quinnipiac better.
Alec?
Yeah, so especially me being kind of a freshman and new to all this, I think the biggest takeaway for me was realizing what precedent all of these kind of what we look up to as figureheads represent to us, because they were so transparent, because they were so real with us. And I know that that's going to set a large tone moving forward with anything that we have, any issues, anything that we want to see done on campus, that we can go to them and that they're very welcoming to all of it.
So Allison, you started out and said you really appreciated the outpouring of support that President Olian showed for club sports, and you all kind of shared the same sentiment that you were happy that President Olian actually sat on the panel and was present this afternoon. Is student government doing anything to kind of help, now that they know this, do you think they'll be doing anything to kind of help push along that club sports?
I think if I can speak for us, I think that her saying that will help us fuel our initiative. We've had a long-lasting club sports initiative, and it started, you know, when I came in 4 years ago. We've had members who are no longer on SGA work on this, so I think that'll spark a new fire in us to really put some muscle behind that.
Like Dr. Thompson said, the horizon has just gotten closer and closer every year, and we're like slowly getting there now. It's just like mostly like logistics and that kind of stuff. I think that it's just like has to be fleshed out before it can come here.
And so staying on topics that maybe you guys will work on, is there something new that you learned from the State of the QUnion, or is there some new fact that you'll take back to student government and maybe create a new initiative to push towards, or is there something that you learned? I know we just talked about club sports tonight that you're already working on an initiative to solve.
I think just one of the big things is just knowing that we have administrator support behind us, but with what we're working on. Like Luke said when he introduced State of the QUnion, a lot of our questions came from a survey that we sent out to the student body, and knowing that all the respondents that we got and that administration is behind what a lot of the students want is really beneficial and positive for us, because we know that when we do go to them with those initiatives that they're actually going to be receptive about them.
I'll also jump in on that. A question was asked about public safety and their questioning process against students in the conduct process, and Dr. Thompson responded he was unaware of some student complaints, so I think that that's an initiative which SGA can take part in, addressing what is the issue behind public safety and transparency with the students during the student conduct process, because it does impact a lot of students on campus.
So Alec, being the freshman class president, what's kind of and you know, Allison and I were seniors. We don't see Quinnipiac from your perspective. What's kind of something that maybe struck you as surprising as an issue that was discussed tonight at State of the QUnion?
Yeah, so not so much an issue that was surprising to me, but more how open they were to increasing a lot of our academic programs, and that was their main focus. So I think as being the class president and going back to my cabinet, I think that when we start to look at initiatives that can be done on campus, we can kind of start shifting our focus from some of the programs that we have now and start to shift on how we can better implement some of the ones that are coming up. And we can also start to look at how the community as a whole can start to grow from a lot of those, and we can help kind of bring this idea of a community to campus.
All right, well, thank you all for joining me this afternoon, and congratulations on student government for hosting a successful State of the Union.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Q30's live stream from the State of the Union. I'm Joel Vanner. Have a great evening.